middle, you can see more.
Okay.
Hey, whoever you are. So anyway, hey John. Hey cousin John. I'm sorry. I know you prefer your title.
Welcome to all who are gathered here, to William's beautiful family. Just a reminder to everyone before I begin, if you've got a cell phone, it's a good time to silence that cell phone and to be fully present, be here now. We are recording this, so if you want to remember it, you can certainly watch it later as well. Today we have gathered to remember, to celebrate the life of Bill Pulgram. My name is Reverend Taryn Strauss, and I welcome you to this home for the human spirit, which supports us in life and remembers us in death. The Unitarian Universalist congregation of Atlanta. We have all come together from different places. We are at different stages in our journey through life. Our paths are varied. We look at life and belief in different ways. One thing we have in common, at one point or another, to some degree or other, our lives have been touched by this life, by Bill Pulgram's life, and Bill's life has touched our own. I remember talking with Bill about the significance of space when we were still in the beginning stages of designing this one that was completed about 6 weeks ago. And he spoke with me about how a building and the space within and without could be the connection, the nexus point for a spiritual experience. He spoke about space in terms of wonderment, awe, freedom of expression, creativity in design. And Bill loved the previous building that housed this congregation on Cliff Valley Way for its ingenuity of design. He loved how the space flowed like a mandala, so that when you sat in those pews and stadium seating in a circular design, you could look across the sanctuary and see the face of God, or the face of love, looking back at you. I think Bill would have appreciated this space for its intentionally designed ceiling made to represent a pair of hands folding, sheltering the community. Asymmetrical, just like real life can be a little unbalanced, but still inspiring a gasp of awe as one enters the space. That was very important to Bill. I think he would have enjoyed how people walk through these halls exclaiming, "I can't quite put my finger on it, but it just feels so good here." It's a vibe, really. Bill knew about the flow of energy throughout a space, how it can reach into a person's heart and make them feel empathy, connection, a sense of home. I hope he would have been proud of the home we are making here. And we do come together now, not as a matter of ending our relationship with him, but as a matter of opening our relationship, a new way of appreciating his life and all it has meant and will continue to mean to us. To honor the life of Bill Pulgram, we will now invite one of his granddaughters, Mara Lily Pulgram, to light our chalice, symbol of Unitarian Universalism, our chalice flame today. Welcome to this gathering of all those who love William Pulgram. We return to our memories and to our love to discover that which triumphs over death. In the fellowship of love, we never cease to live. So let us share in acceptance and in thanksgiving, grateful for his life, comforted by one another's presence, and sustained by the peace of all that is sacred. Amen. I want to also let you know, if you noticed outside, we are in the process of opening the Pulgram Gallery in honor of the works, particularly that Lucia Pulgram put into beginning a gallery, opening the first gallery at UCA years ago. And so tomorrow at 12:30, you are all invited back for our special gallery dedication you're invited for worship at 11, and then also at 12:30, a special gathering for the dedication of the Pulgram Gallery. So Bill gave so much to this community of UUCA for so many years. He was president of the congregation back when Gene Pickett was the minister, and Bill and Lucia raised their family here and were dedicated members and community members for great many years throughout their lives. So it is now my pleasure to welcome the Pulgram family, who will share Bill's story and celebrate his remarkable life with all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Strauss. My name is Anthony Pulgram, and I am the third of Lucia and Bill's 4 children. On behalf of the Pulgram family, welcome. We are very grateful you've joined us today. My brother, Christopher, and I would like to share with you one of our father's, favorite folk songs, which he learned as a child growing up in Vienna. It is entitled, "Mein Vater war ein Wienerin." My mother was a Viennese, and when he heard it, he loved to sing along. gestern gewesen wär. Es war ein schwacher Sonntagsmorgen, da ruft Mutter geschwind, komm her, lass dir Gesicht und Handel waschen, lass dir die frisieren. Heut will ich zum ersten Mal die Haufen Männer fühlen. Oben hat's mir zeigt die Pracht, hat mich gestreichelt und hat gelacht, hat sagt, schau, der Stephansdom und der blaue Donaustrom und das Häusemännergründe ist dein Heimatstadt, dein Wien, bleib stets treu dein schönen Ort. Ich hab kalten an mein Ort. Mein Model war auf Erinner, drum hab ich so gerne. Sie war die Binde, die Liebe und dem zu mein einzigen goldenen Fern. Mein Walter war auf Erinner, drum hab ich so gerne. Sie war die Binde, die Liebe und dem zu mein einzigen goldenen Fern.
Good afternoon. I'm Lawrence Pulgram, one of Bill Pulgram's sons.
And I'm Christopher Pulgram. I think I know everybody here. I'm also one of William Leopold Pulgram's sons. Today, we would like to share with you something about Dad's life. It's our pleasure. Dad was born to Sigmund and Gisela Pulgram at home in the family apartment in Vienna on January 1st, 1921. His father was the manager of one of Vienna's finest clothing stores and earned enough money to keep the family comfortable, as Dad puts it, in their well-appointed apartment. My father had a 5-year older brother named Ernst, who Dad greatly admired, and a younger sister named Lily, with whom he was very close. They played together a lot, here with an unnamed goat, and were clearly very fond of one another.
Poldi, or Puli, as various of his friends nicknamed him, liked goulash, marinen kanoodle, schnitzel, nockerel, many of which he cooked for his family decades later. He learned some piano. He attended a liberal arts college, or high school, which got him tickets to the theater and to the opera, which he liked to attend. And he said that he liked pretty things. And as much of that as the spaces where they were. He remembers going to the Kunsthistorische Museum and thinking more about the spaces in his memory than what was actually there. His family were proud Viennese. Although they were partly Jewish, they felt fully included in Viennese life. He had a close group of friends who pledged that they would stay together. And most of the photos that you see of Leopold was wearing his traditional Austrian lederhosen. With his father's trade and his lifelong dapper taste, he was always well dressed. Then Anschluss happened, the Nazi takeover of Austria in early 1938. Dad said Nazis in Vienna mushroomed out of the ground. And within 2 months, Dad and a dozen others in his class were called to the principal's office and immediately expelled from school. It turned out, they were told it was because they were set up to be caught by the Nazis and beaten up that afternoon. So this was a favor. In June of 1938, on his way back from a Boy Scout meeting, the Gestapo grabbed him off the street, hauled him into their local office, roughed him up, threatened him with being sent to a concentration camp on the spot. One of them said to him, "You nasty Jew, you can't wear those Austrian clothes," looking at that ID card. Dad lied. He said that he had given away the lederhosen, but he promised one of them that he would give them that fancy jacket, and the next day made good on that, and he survived that way by skirting what could have been the end right there.
On Kristallnacht, November 9th, 1938, Dad decided for some unknown reason before going to bed to bandage his leg. And his father noticed it. Early the next morning, the Gestapo and soldiers came banging on the family's apartment door, looking to take my father away to a concentration camp. Dad heard his father explaining loudly downstairs that his son was unable to get out of bed because of his injured leg. The Nazis barged into Dad's bedroom and said, "Get out of bed, you lazy Jew." Dad showed them the bandage, saying, "I can't walk, I'm injured." The Gestapo agent thought for a moment and then decided, forget it, just leave him. And so Dad survived. But that was the moment Dad knew he had to leave. Dad and his friend Paul Eisenklam fled Vienna by train in 1939, landing in Manchester, England to work as a tailor's apprentice on a visa obtained by the Quakers. Mr. Marks, a clothing merchant, took him into his family, which included a 3-year-old boy named Eric. The Markses were very kind and provided Dad with food, shelter, and work where he could learn to sew. For 70 years, Dad wanted to reach out to the Marks family to thank them. He mentioned that one night, and my niece, Isabel, located them online so Dad could thank the Marks descendants, including a much older Eric, whom I was able to meet and thank in Manchester in person. During the time in Manchester, Dad was still receiving news from his family in Vienna.
And that raises the lederhosen story. So Dad got a package and it had his lederhosen in it, and though that wasn't maybe what he would be wearing in England, that was good to have. And then a little bit later, he received a letter from his mother, and it talked about what was going on and dropped in the line that hope you got the lederhosen. I paid special attention to the buttons when we sent them over. And Dad scratched his head and said, "I don't know why she'd refer to the buttons." And so, of course, he went and looked at the buttons. And there, under the button, was a little incision in the leather. And behind that incision in the leather, his mother had sewn into the lederhosen her diamond earrings to get them to her son. He never saw her again. And a dozen years later, he made those earrings into my mother's engagement ring, which she wore for the 68 years of their marriage.
When the Germans began bombing England, Austrians and Germans there were rounded up into internment camps. That included Dad, who was held for several months, mostly outdoors, and sometimes separated by only a few feet from captured Nazi soldiers. The Marks family received and opened a letter to Dad from an organization in Atlanta working to rescue Jews. Dad was tracked down in the camps and taken to get a visa to the U.S. He headed to Liverpool, where he waited 3 days in the harbor because of German U-boats in the North Atlantic. In the middle of one night, the motor started, and Dad's ship, all alone and without escort, left Europe for the open ocean. His new life, Dad later often said, was one he could never have dreamed of when he left his homeland and family forever.
Hi, I'm Deirdre, the daughter. After a harrowing transatlantic zigzag journey avoiding U-boats, upon his arrival in the United States, like so many others, Leopold Pulgram changed his name. He became William Leopold Pulgram, which he had been told was a more American name, and which quickly became shortened by others to Bill. He began, again as so many immigrants do, by taking odd jobs, construction in the Boston area and a department store in Atlanta. But what he really wanted to do was to join the army and fight the Nazis. He had to petition the government to allow him to serve since he wasn't a citizen, but he was finally enabled to enlist in the Army in 1943. Before he even completed, basic training, he was pulled aside and sent to join a special services unit in the southwestern US. He used to tell a story about when, after many trains and transfers, he arrived there and walked into the barracks, and the other men asked him, "What do you do?" And he said, "What do you mean?" And they said, "Well, I play trumpet, this one sings, that one can dance, that one plays the drums." And he realized that Special Services was an entertainment corps, and that he had been sent there because at some point he had said he played some piano. So instead of real basic training, someone showed him once how to fire a gun, and then Dad spent World War II entertaining the troops, hosting at USO centers, and as Mom liked to say, putting makeup on chorus girls. Dad loved to dance, and he was a fabulous dancer. He was always in demand at every party throughout his life, but more about that later. After the war ended in 1946, Dad returned to Atlanta to study architecture at Georgia Tech on the GI Bill. There he had a strong connection with the Felber family, who had been part of the group to sponsor him coming to this country. Dad loved, and as we said, greatly admired his elder brother Ernst, and stayed in close communication and connection with him throughout his life. While he was at Tech and Ernst was in a PhD program at Harvard, they worked together to try to locate their parents and sister, whom they'd been writing to for years with no response. What a blow it must have been to find out that they had been murdered by the Nazis. Lily from disease in Theresienstadt, and his parents were killed at Auschwitz, arriving there on the last transport from Theresienstadt. Dad made many connections at Tech, including the director of design, Harold Bush-Brown, who took him under his wing and introduced him to other young artistic people, some of whom, like Joe Amisano, Dante Santacroce, Ike, and Nora Porter, became lifelong friends. It was at the Bush-Browns' house that Bill met the love of his life for the first time, Lucia Fairley, a native Atlantan artist. With their second meeting, the romance began. Lucia was working in New York at a publishing house, and Bill was headed to the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, but their long-distance love endured, and a proposal ensued, with the blessing of Lucia's mother, who quickly became a mother also to Bill. Dad was offered a professional position in Paris, but knowing that Mom wanted to remain in Atlanta, he returned, and they were married at the Peachtree Christian Church on January 12, 1951. They lived at first in a small carriage house behind the Felbers on Habersham Road, and Dad began his work with Finch Alexander, the architectural firm. Their lives were filled with creative, artistic, and bohemian friends who shared their joy for life and progressive political views. In 1956, their first child was born, me. A fulfillment of a long-time wish, and they moved to a small rental house on Eureka Drive in Garden Hills. More children followed, and soon we were a family of 6, moving to the new home that Dad had designed for us and built for us on East Conway.
A little song for our grandfather who was happiest when he was dancing.
My brother-in-law says we should say who we are. I'm Donovan. I'm Bill's grandson.
And I'm Isabel, granddaughter.
Ready? 1, 2. Heaven, I'm in heaven, and my heart beats so that I can hardly speak, and I seem to find the happiness I seek when we're out together, dancing cheek to cheek.
Heaven, I'm in heaven, and the cares that hung around me through the week seem to vanish like a gambler's lucky streak when we're out together, dancing cheek to cheek. Oh, I'd love to climb a mountain and to reach the highest peak, but it doesn't thrill me half as much as dancing cheek to cheek.
And I love to go out fishing in a river or a creek, but it doesn't thrill me half as much as dancing cheek to cheek.
Come on, dance with me. I need my arms around you. The charm about you will carry me through
To heaven, yes, I'm in heaven, and my heart beats so that I can hardly speak, and I seem to find the happiness I seek when we're out together, dancing cheek to cheek, cheek to cheek, cheek to cheek, cheek to cheek.
Hard to leave that one and move to the professional life. Bill Pulgram brought more to architecture than an extraordinary aesthetic. He brought a new way of thinking about interior design, which he believed to be properly a continuation of the architectural process, balancing physical requirements to meet human needs with visual ambiance to stimulate human aspirations. He rejected interior design as a marker of status. Instead, his solutions formed open, module-based designs to encourage collaboration, interaction, and productivity. As he put it, to include the variety and diversity essential to successful interior space. The 2018 textbook, Interior Design Masters, called him decades ahead with his thinking, including his biography among 300 of the greatest since the Renaissance. Bill spent a decade with the Fabrat firm and his mentor, Cecil Alexander. In his spare time, he designed 5 houses for friends and his family's home of 47 years on East Conway. In 1963, Bill spun out his own interiors firm, Associated Space Design, which continues in subsequent iterations today as ASD Sky. To mark just how early 1963 was for interior design, consider that Art Gensler, Bill's friend and fellow interior specialist, did not start the Gensler firm, now the largest in the world, until 1965. It's written that by designing from the inside out, Art Gensler revolutionized the industry, but it was Bill Pulgram who was the first chair of the pioneering AIA Interiors Committee in 1975. By then, Bill had already gained headlines for the McDonald's headquarters outside of Washington. It was not just the movable task modules that turned heads. So did the suede-sided, alpha-paced, waterbed-floored think tank. The New York Times said it was supposed to be so totally different. There are virtually no vertical or solid reference points, for instance. You will be unconsciously encouraged to think differently. Thank you. We'll get back to those. So you're unconsciously encouraged to think differently. Well, maybe that's so. But it made for a great story, and other award-winning projects followed, including the headquarters for Coca-Cola, Southern Bell, Black & Decker. The 1983 renovation of the Post Office Pavilion in Washington, D.C. brought a new multi-use purpose to a structure at risk of demolition decades before that post office was redone as the Trump and then Waldorf Astoria hotels. Bill was a fellow in the AIA and won lots of other honors that in truth he wouldn't want us to list. He was most proud of the people that he assembled and mentored, many of whom are here. A team that was diverse decades before that term had currency. He was an early promoter of opportunities for women and progressive policies. Although you would never necessarily know it from these pictures, which are caught in a bit of a time warp. But ultimately, nothing gave him more happiness in his career than helping those that he worked with to realize their own dreams, even as he succeeded beyond his wildest. When Dad was the president of this church, every week we sang the same hymn. It was We Would Be One, and we will now ask you to join in singing that hymn with us.
We would be one.
I'll begin this section of sharing family memories by offering a couple of sweet ones of my own from my childhood that still make me smile and are really moments of intimacy and connection that went beyond words or intellect. Dad never talked much about his past when we were growing up and never spoke German to us unless specifically asked. I think holding that boundary was part of what enabled him to keep going forward with building his career and his family. And that made it all the more special when he would come downstairs at night to sit on the edge of the bed and sing the lullabies that he knew from his childhood. Schlaf, Kindlein, schlaf, der Vater hüt die Schaf. Die Mutter schüttelt Bäumelein, da fällt herab ein Träumelein. Schlaf, Kindlein, schlaf. I felt so safe and so loved in those times. It was like seeing inside him and touching his heart. Another memory, also sweet, was dancing with Dad. Starting in my teens and continuing through my whole life, I know a lot of you in this room have had that joyful experience too. He was a marvelous dancer and could gracefully lead even the least experienced partner through a sequence of swing steps, especially to music from the heyday of the big bands. The specific image I have in my mind is from when I was in high school. Bette Midler had just released her version of Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy. I have a vivid memory of one afternoon when I was planning for a dance at school, and I asked, and Dad took time to actually teach me some swing and jitterbug steps as the song played over and over on the record player in the living room. When you danced with Dad, he made you feel light on your feet and beautiful and happy, because he was too. The last time I danced with him, he was 99 years old, and it still felt the same way.
So Dad encouraged his sons to forego American football and play soccer, his childhood sport. My brothers and I were indoctrinated early and fell in love with the sport, which I went on to play in college. We spent many years running the pitch, but what might be most memorable was Dad running. You see, he famously sprinted up and down the sidelines. He would loudly direct our movements, implore us to seize on an opportunity, and of course, encourage the referee to see things his way. The takeaway? Well, we often won. And we couldn't have had a greater and more vocal champion. When I was 12 years old and performing with the Atlanta Boy Choir in the Woodruff Arts Center Symphony Hall, we were preparing for a European tour. And the concert was two parts, a Benjamin Britten opera and a Haydn mass. A long program and extremely hot on stage. About 30 minutes into the second half, a boy fainted, fell off the risers, and wobbled on his own off into the wings. And about 5 minutes later, a second boy fainted, and this time a stagehand had to come out, pick the boy up, and as they were carrying this child off stage, Dad stood up in the middle of the orchestra section of Symphony Hall and shouted, "Stop the concert. These are boys. They are not soldiers." And the concert was stopped. And that was Dad, courageous. He was never afraid to stand up for what was right or just, and he did it often and set a high bar for all of us.
Dad loved driving convertibles. In the first one, a 1963 VW Volkswagen Beetle. His four kids used to wrestle to see who could get the hot spot under the dashboard by the heater, because he always had the top down, especially, it seemed, if it was freezing or raining outside. And then most of you probably saw him driving around in his red Mini Cooper convertible, the next best of all of them to the Cutlass, which he had for years and years. The Mini Cooper he drove until the week before he died, all around town. He loved the feeling of freedom that came with the Volkswagen. The wind blowing through his hair, the sun beating down on him, being open to seeing everyone and being seen, and just absorbing nature and that world around him and everything that was going on in it. And Dad loved to travel. Another courageous act, he took my sister Deirdre and me to Europe at an impossibly adolescent age. We had a great time, a lot. But one of the greatest was Dad introducing us to his love for Chartres Cathedral, which was my first and still my favorite. Dad talked about the purity and the integrity of the Gothic architecture, the brilliance of the stained glass work. But especially I remember as we drove and Chartres rose 15 kilometers away out of the plain, that it was an aspiration coming out of the middle of France rather than a place for crowning kings in the middle of the city. Dad was much more about Chartres than he was about Notre Dame. From France, on that trip, we made it as far as Salzburg, Austria, and then we turned left into Germany. And when asked, why aren't we going to Vienna, Dad's answer was, well, it's too far out of the way. And the reality, of course, was that he wasn't ready yet to take his kids there, that on his evolution, he hadn't made it the whole way from the despair of loss of your sister and your parents to what became his unbridled optimism as he raised his grandchildren. But Dad ultimately got to take the grandkids to Austria 30 years later, and here's one of them, my son Daniel.
I didn't know my grandfather as Bill Pulgram or as Leopold or as an amazing architect. For us, he was just Papa. Papa was a man who always had time for his grandchildren and for his family, and who wanted to share his history with us. As a young child, that history manifested in ways like eating his Linzer torta, or playing Huppa Huppa Rider and bouncing on his leg. Well, as we grew up, the games changed to games of chess, which he especially loved to play with his family. We will never forget the stories he told us or the experiences he shared. What a feeling it was, going with him to his old school in Vienna and looking up at a wall of the school students who were expelled by the Nazis and seeing his name right in the middle. I keep his inspiration in my heart and his chess set as one of my most treasured possessions. I miss him.
Just a month before Dad died, on March 16th, 2020, Dad moved in with me for a few weeks. At the time, the COVID pandemic was just starting to endanger seniors living in retirement centers, and the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra had canceled all of its concerts and rehearsals. Dad and I decided to isolate together. During his stay, Dad continued to keep up with his walking, practicing yoga, keeping up correspondence with friends, and telling wonderful stories. At the age of 99, he shared in fantastic detail, for example, how he got the McDonald's headquarters job, and dear friends and I enjoyed his animated storytelling full of humor and vigor. I prepared some delicious meals too. Eventually, it began to happen before every meal, that we would share what would become our toast. And one of my favorite memories, the toast was, "Here's to being together." And that was all we needed to be reminded of how lucky we both were to be able to enjoy our love for one another and our enduring friendship.
George Bernard Shaw wrote, "Life is not about finding yourself, it's about creating yourself." And this was Dad. Once retired, he never slowed down. He became active in myriad organizations, including Architects Without Borders, Georgia Tech, the Mountain, and Lenbrook, where he lived his final 9 years and served on numerous committees and founded a chess club. Dad loved large family gatherings, for which he would often bake Viennese desserts. He loved to share in the making of Linsentorte, Apfelstrudel, and Marillenknödel. Ever the taskmaster and a stickler for proper method, he insisted on foregoing the Cuisinart and laboriously using knives to chop up butter. More than anything, he wanted his children, grandchildren, and extended family to have meaningful and lasting relationships. He would say to us often, "Be friends." He shared a close bond with our dear cousins, many of whom are with us today. For more than 20 years, Dad led groups of friends on excursions around the globe. Nope, went too far. No, missing one. All right, so Sunita and I were lucky enough to share one such trip to Italy. Dad was 90, Mom 85. A group of 12, we took daily excursions in our 3-car caravan, sometimes circling around about 3 or 4 times before discerning the correct path to our next town, Palladian Villa or theater. And Dad embraced this challenge at the age of 90, leading a group in a foreign land, and he was admired and beloved by his traveling companions. Oh. Can you get back to a solo shot of Dad? Yeah, there we go. That's the one. This is sort of a wonderful shot of Dad, and you know. Unique to Dad were some theatrical hand movements. His "I'm not sure about that" would be accompanied by an outstretched hand with tensed and wiggling fingers. And no one will forget his dismissive hand flip. You know, and it was especially dramatic when he would turn his back to you and give you a double. His theatricality was with him always. So Bill will be remembered for his personal and authentic connections. I'm going to scoot forward. There we go. With all those who he encountered, whether a housekeeper, a home health aide, restaurant waitstaff, chess club member, or CEO, he took time to get to know people. Dad would go out of his way to encourage them and support their efforts to get ahead. He saw potential in almost everyone and found great satisfaction in helping individuals realize their dreams. After all, he realized his dream against all odds. How did he create his extraordinary arc of a life? I believe it was because of his uncommon resilience, laser-sharp focus, determination, and being grounded in family, he adored his wife, Lucia, and was devoted to her. They leaned on each other for 68 years. He treasured his 4 children, their partners, and his grandchildren. More than anything, Dad loved his family. And it was this love which sustained him as he sustained us. We now welcome the Peachtree String Quartet.
Yes? Great. We would like to perform for you now the Heilige Dankgesang movement from Beethoven's String Quartet, Opus 132. This is one of my favorite compositions, written by Ludwig van Beethoven, and a piece that was written very late in Beethoven's life. Beethoven had, prior to this being able to write this, he had had a very grave illness, and he survived. And that survival inspired him to write something which was literally translated. The Heilige Dankgesang means song of thanksgiving. This, although it starts softly and slowly, is a celebration of life. This movement, single movement, is in 5 sections: Adagio molto, Andante, Adagio molto, Andante, and then finally Adagio molto. And it's just one movement, but really this piece is a journey. Each section is about 3 minutes long. And it is an incredibly enduring piece. When I get the chance to perform it today, you all know, my brothers and sisters, we all played musical instruments. I put the bow on the string and we'll start playing this, but this will be the voice of my brothers and my sister, my cousins, who are also musicians, even if they're around somewhere, ancestors, because I know music is was always an important part of the family for generations. So I'm just an instrument, and this is our music, and my privilege to play it with these wonderful colleagues. Thanks.
take a moment to just look around and feel what we have in this room. Here we are together with our hearts open, connecting with the stunning beauty of the music and with one another. Two things that Dad would have loved. May the legacy of William Pulgram be that he was a deeply caring, creative, courageous, generous, and gifted person who made a difference in the world by creating beautiful spaces for people to be in and by weaving beautiful connections among people. That those who knew him professionally respected him, that his family and many friends loved him with all their hearts, that he rejected and fought against intolerance, that he was curious about the world and about other people, that he did not talk down to anyone based on their background, and that anyone who lost his respect did so for a reason, that he loved his children and his grandchildren and did all that he could to help their lives be the best they could possibly be, and that he loved his wife, Lucia, beyond measure and cared for her in every way that he knew how for all of their lives. Dad would want us to celebrate today, to enjoy food and wine and conversation as we remember and reflect what was best in him and what is best in each other. Please come and join our family in the art gallery now for a brief reception. Thanks so much to all of the people who have taken part in making this happen. And thanks to all of you for being here with us on this really special day. We'll see you in the other room.